Hi, this is Paul. Henry, who was recently on the House of Woo, made a little video. And Mark Parker sent me the video to let me know that it happened, which I appreciated. And I watched it this morning. And it wasn't a very long video, but I thought it was very helpful. Henry came into the corner recently on one of my Friday live streams, and then he's become a regular in the House of Woo. And well, a number of things I'll talk about, and then maybe what I'll do is actually just sort of include, I hope this is okay with Henry, because again, part of the culture of the corner is sort of recycling each other's materials. And because Henry has maybe 6 subscribers, most of you won't, maybe you'll have a little trouble finding his channel, but I'll put the link below to his channel so you can subscribe to his channel so he can get that bump and he can at least get a start depending on if he wants to continue to do these things. Number of not issues, but number of things that he raised in his video that were pretty important to me. Number one, that this is a maker space, and his talking about making the video, coming out of the lurk. Recently, this morning is Sunday, and I released the massive conversation I had with Ethan, which I thought was excellent. And Ethan's very much a maker, and he's not a lurker, he's a maker. And he's been producing content on Substack, and he started his own sort of game show thing that he did on his Substack channel. And, again, he's playing around, he's implementing, he's writing, he's doing stuff. Another individual, I just started watching his video too this morning. He talked with Drew, the musicologist, Branson. Is that his name? I don't know. I'll have to, as I watch the video, as I open up church this morning, I'll get deeper into it. And again, this was let me know. So this was informed me on Twitter. And usually, if someone lets me know about their channel, I'll grab on and I'll subscribe to it pretty quickly. And I know somebody out there will have a grievance because I learned about their channel and I haven't subscribed and I haven't given them a slot yet. And everything in good time. So I was thinking about the economics. Of course, Marcus Serra is our corner economist who watches things carefully. And when I put a book about religion and economy up, he'll say, well, I'm not sure that's quite a good book. And so I really appreciate Marcus's feedback and input because he's followed the corner quite carefully. And I was thinking about sort of the balance between audience and makers in the corner. Maybe there's sort of 3. There's audience, lurkers, and makers. And it's really probably a lurker is someone who, I'd say an audience is comfortable being an audience, and they're probably going to stay in that category. A lurker is someone who's feeling pulled to come out of the lurk. There's sort of a hidden aspect to them. They're working out something in them. And then makers are sort of, once they come out of the lurk, once they start to participate, once they're willing to participate either with their full face and their full name, or at least a consistent pseudonym. A consistent pseudonym is important because the consistent pseudonym is sort of your identity, your soul, your psyche in the corner so that you can be interacted with and you can participate. So I was thinking about the ratio of audience and lurker and maker in the corner. And I was thinking about that in terms of economics and thinking about how those different ratios contribute either to the health or to the retardation of the proper development of the corner. So that was one issue I was thinking about. Then he started talking about church and started comparing church to the corner. And that was really helpful to me too, because of course, everything that I've done in the corner grows out of my formation, which has been in the church, and my desires in the church. And I really liked what he was, when he talked about authenticity, he was right on. Now, there's a video I haven't treated yet formally. I haven't even finished watching it. It's where John Vervaeke and, I forget the name of it, a regular collaborator of his, a friend of his. And then another guy, a student, they did a video on authenticity, which I really have to pay more attention to because buzzwords are holy words. And Henry was exactly right, noting that so much of the content that is spun out in the evangelical world, and I would say probably just in the world in general, not just the evangelicals, the Orthodox have their buzzwords, the Catholics have their buzzwords, and to a degree, part of what you notice in terms of the formation of a community are their buzzwords, holy words that they are sort of trading in. And buzzwords and holy words are very interesting because they're usually words that we sort of have an intuitive sense of, but we struggle to define, and that's why they're holy words. And authenticity is that word right now in our culture, and evangelicals who are highly attuned to culture, generally speaking, and I'd say part of what is good and bad, because they usually come together, about the evangelical space is that it is a maker space. People are encouraged very quickly in the evangelical world to jump in and try their hand and do something. Whereas I was just reading a Substack by someone who became Orthodox, and when he became Orthodox, he sort of sat down and shut up. And he didn't really sort of come out until his spiritual father gave him permission to come out. And there's a beauty and a goodness to that too. So I really liked what Henry was talking about, how so many evangelical churches are trying to work with this question of authenticity. And this has been a big issue in the evangelical space, and very much an issue in the emerging church space. The question of sort of the dichotomy between selling and pastoral transparency. Because pastoral transparency is all about authenticity, and selling is in some ways all about using again Mueller's sincerity culture. I was watching a video on the economics of China, and the video was going into the way that the Chinese tend to distort their disclosure of economic realities in the country. And in that sense, they're always sort of selling. They're selling the China brand. And one of my criticisms of Christian YouTube is that it's always sort of selling the Christian brand and selling the evangelical brand or the Orthodox brand or the Catholic brand. They're always selling the brand. And now on one hand, there's a necessity to that, an importance to that. But on the other hand, part of the reason the emerging church leans so much into authenticity and transparency was because the questions of hypocrisy are a constant element in any human being, because we have reputation that we have to manage. But then it's also an element of sort of bodies as they work their way up. That there's an element of the body which needs to be preserved, and there's an element of the body whose bullshit needs to be understood. So, because you don't really know someone until you both have an understanding of the validity beneath their reputation and the degree of their bullshit. You need to have a sense of both of those things to know somebody. And, Friday we had the conversation about marriage. By the way, the little dog that I raised is going to graduate training and be assigned to a disabled person to help. So I will not be doing a live stream on Friday. Instead, I will be in some church in the Bay Area bawling my eyes out as my little dog goes on stage and is given to some disabled person to make their life better. And I'm going to cry like a baby. I know it already. I cried at the last one, and it wasn't even my dog. So, yeah. So there's always reputation and hypocrisy, and those are elements of all of us. Because none of us, these two things are a function of ideals. We all have ideals, and we can't live without ideals. And our ideals are aspirational, and they pull us up into them. And so for that reason, we've always got See, reputationally, we're always sort of pointing to the ideals, but there's always a degree of bullshit that's going on because we're faking it until we're making it, and the hypocrisy is the faking it quotient. So, Henry is working through that with respect to Southern Baptist churches, evangelical churches, and he sees the corner, I think, as, I think in a sense, this corner is really working on this, partly because we are, for the most part, people of no significant status, reputation, and there's no real money in the game. And so when people go from being lurkers to makers, or even audience to makers, they can be fairly transparent because they don't have a lot to lose, because the stakes in their reputation aren't terribly high. Whereas once you have status, then the reputation transparency issues emerge. And I think, this is a big piece of Jordan Peterson, because Jordan Peterson has been remarkably transparent. And so I think part of, in terms of the conversation about that, the higher status he goes, the more the bullshit quotient will rise. And I think these kinds of dynamics are being played out at all sorts of leadership levels. So in that sense, when you look at, say, Bill Maher's trip to the White House, you can find that on the internet. Part of what impressed Bill Maher about Donald Trump, even though he will continue to critique and criticize and make fun of and attack Donald Trump, part of the reason that Bill Maher's trip to the White House was important was they were sort of able to have their come to Jesus moment with a lot of bullshit. And I think this is, again, part of the reason that the kayfabe conversation is so important and real and salient in the corner, because kayfabe is in some ways a very real way of coming to terms with reputation and bullshit. And again, I can't more highly recommend the Netflix documentary Mr. McMahon and the blurring of these things that is going on. Jesus talks about everything that is concealed will be disclosed. And of course, ideally, you're maximally transparent and you're maximally ideal. But the Son of God gets to do that, and the rest of us struggle. But that's what an ideal is for, to pull us up into it and help us to relate. So I really enjoyed what Henry did with the talking about evangelicalism and authenticity. And then the third thing that I noted in watching that video was the mentorship area and the encouragement area, the encouragement rituals that the corner is developing. One of the things I saw in Peterson early on was that he was encouraging young men. And this was actually one of the points that Liberty Lockdown video had about Peterson. And that his specific criticism against Peterson was, early on, Peterson was the kind of guy who would, in a sense, eat with sinners. What do I mean by that? He would eat with the kinds of incels, racists, bigots, and I think, in a sense, and this is going to really stretch some people, you can't understand Jesus eating with sinners in the New Testament if you can't understand the need to eat with bigots and racists and anti-Semites and all of those sorts of people who are beyond the pale. The reason in the New Testament you have Jesus eats with sinners and tax collectors, and the Pharisees recoil at this, is because these people are beyond the pale. They are beyond the pale for the Pharisees, given the particular dynamics of the Pharisaic culture war. Now, I myself recoiled listening to Jordan Peterson talk with Joe Rogan, with his, I thought, an incredibly sloppy lack of technical, cautious speech, that how Peterson referred to the Pharisees. I know that part of what happens in the Protestant Reformation is that the Protestant Reformation sort of lumps in Pharisees with papists and Roman Catholic. I'll just keep it at papists, because sort of the specific dynamics of the Reformation, because of course John Calvin and Martin Luther and just about everybody else were raised as faithful, loyal, in-house, longhouse Catholics during the 16th century. So, this is part of the reason, and actually I was listening to Mark Vernon's, really enjoyed the first half of Mark Vernon's video on Dante and the papacy, how Dante put how many popes in hell. You're sort of allowed to say that now. About medieval popes, of course, I'm continuing to just working towards the end of the book on Vatican I, which is so utterly fascinating. Anyway, one of the things that Peterson was willing to do, early Peterson was willing to do, was be an encourager of sinners and tax collectors in the public space. And now that Peterson has risen up in status, he is, part of, again, what that Liberty Lockdown video did, and why he was so angry, was he flipped that Peterson was no longer willing to eat with sinners and tax collectors. And hey, that's a tough point. But in order to sort of lean into that point, you have to feel that point. And you have to understand exactly what it cost Jesus to eat with sinners and tax collectors. And the answer to that is it cost him his life. It cost Jesus his life. And by life, of course, we mean that physically in the case of Jesus, but praise God for the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment. For most of us, it might cost us our reputation and our platform and our status to eat with sinners and tax collectors. I can't let this video go on too long because I have to open up the church, and I'm just trying to get my thoughts in before the rush of the day starts and everything sort of gets washed away. And so what I saw I didn't get a chance to watch that whole House of Woo. I wanted to, but there's just a limit to what I can absorb, which again is why this borrowing, this upcycling that we do in the corner is so important. Because when someone finds something important and salient and they borrow it from another channel and they put it on their own channel and they repeat and they repeat and they repeat, it's sort of like the Google way of tracking relevance realization, which Google did very early on as merely a search engine when they looked at, well, what blog post should we elevate? Well, we'll elevate the blog post to the number of links. And so in that sense, the early Google search engine was sort of a very rough version of AI and an LLM. And so the LLMs are in many ways just sort of a natural extension of the evolution of trying to teach machines relevance realization by being parasitic of us. So, and I'm going to practice that by containing most of Henry's video after this one. And the reason I do that is, of course, even though it makes my own channel suffer because of just the dynamics of how this works, more people will now see Henry's channel because of what I did. And I think that is that is a feature of the corner and not a bug. But it is a feature of the corner that keeps the corner small, which again also has its upsides. But one of the things I really saw was that this corner is a mentorship structure. And not only do you have the whole old guys on the House of Woo, and again, what I love about the House of Woo is you've got Mark Parker with his really interesting form of both Buddhism and Christian fundamentalism in a way that only real life could actually create. And then you've got charismatic former hippie Ron Copperman, who sets off the alarm of his church in as a staple of that. And you've got Rick, and Rick is this really cool guy who has an amazing story that was told on Mark Parker's channel. If you haven't listened to Rick's story, you really need to, about Rick going to Vietnam, and what an amazing boomer story. It's just an astounding story. But Rick, Rick bothers people here because Rick is where he's at religious and politically. So he's much more sort of in the perennial space in terms of his theology, and he's very much more on the left in terms of his politics, which makes him, unpopular in some aspects of the corner. So, but there he is in the House of Woo, and so you've got these three guys in the House of Woo, and who are crossing all of these. I mean, the House of Woo is basically a regular table for sinners and tax collectors of various sides, which I love. And the House of Woo is functioning as a node in the corner now, and it's been really great watching the House of Woo sort of expand. Mark Parker is really good at branding. Mark Parker has a good sense of sort of facilitation, and Mark has both ideas that he's strong about, and so Mark reacts to things, but Mark can also do the repairing conversations. And so these are qualities that I see in Mark that make him a really good node in the network. He's got enough saltiness in him that he's not going to get along with everybody, but he's got enough humility and maturity and reparation in him that he can have the reparative conversations to continue to maintain networks that have salty diversity and sinner and tax collector diversity. So that's super important for a mentorship network. And so what was really beautiful about this clip, so then Henry does his own video, and then Henry has a clip from the House of Woo. And it takes a little while to get going, but I really encourage you to see this video all the way to the end. Because what happens is McMo comes in. And McMo says, you got all these guys with their hoary beards and all the boomers up here. Let me tell you how it really is. And McMo and Mark Parker very rightly says, yeah, McMo is, he's midlife crisis material down there, and with getting bumped from his mega church and where he's at in terms of trying to figure out, what his career trajectory is now that he's sort of post-church, and he's kind of bumped, and he's a misfit, and he doesn't fit in, and he's working his weekend live streams, but McMo has an immense amount of wisdom. And what McMo does then is gives this element of advice to a young man that I thought, oh, McMo, that was so good. That was amazingly good. And I'll probably clip that out at some point, because I thought it was that good, and I want to do more talking about it, because I thought McMo was right, because it gets into sort of the reality of why, let's say, Orthodox and Roman Catholic, but Orthodox confessing is, I think, important, but why I think what McMo sort of sets up is kind of a next stage in figuring out how confession in the modern world should work. Because there's a reason Luther, with his priesthood of all believers, sort of destroys the confessional, but there's a reason why Protestant churches still sort of haven't sufficiently replaced the confessional, and I think actually McMo gives a good model there. So at that point of the video, I thought, yes, this is exactly what we need. The church needs mentorship. And it can't, part of the reason I think it's working quite well now with the Orthodox is because Orthodoxy in America is still small. But part of what Roman Catholics and Protestants deal with all over the place is scale. And scale is enormously difficult. So, yeah, I thought Henry's video, and then the House of Woo, and what McMo did, I couldn't be more pleased. I couldn't be happier. Because, again, the dynamics that I see here are, I think, really healthy. and really right. Now, again, what I just said about Protestants and Roman Catholics with respect to size, still true. Very true. Because one of the things I've been very nervous and afraid about in terms of the corner has been scale. That this beautiful space can be destroyed by an algorithmic tsunami. And so, in that way, I think some of the things that keep us small, the idiosyncratic nature of the corner, the unpublished nature of the corner, the maker versus seller dynamic of the corner, the maker versus audience dynamic of the corner, help keep this corner small. But there's downsides to that corner smallness too, and that I think part of the reason that part of us long for more size is because we know there are more people out there that need this, and we're not going to get there in time. So 26 minutes, 8:47. Got to open the church. Estuary's at 9. Got to open the gate. Got to move the cameras. Got to get everything set up so that when the people come here at a certain hour in the morning, they come here, everything's where it needs to be. This is all the backroom stuff that a pastor does, a pastor of a small church at least. So that all the other pieces, when everything starts to come online, even in this tiny little church on Sunday morning, because there's no fat on this church, baby. This is a keto carnivore church, man. There's no fat on this body. It is one lean, mean ministry machine. It is probably just very few years from the grave. Perhaps. Our God is the kind of God that knows his way out of the tomb, as GK said. Okay, Car, yeah, it's 30 minutes. It's 30 minutes. All right, I'm going to close out this video, but, and again, I'm going to attach most of Henry's video at the end of this, because that's the culture of the corner. We are not only a maker space, we are an upcycle space, and I'm going to upcycle Henry's video, who in turn upcycles the House of Woo, hopefully for your benefit. When I'm going to release this, I don't know yet, because I released, obviously, the massive yet excellent conversation I did with Ethan Cawhey, who, again, I'm super excited when another maker reveals themselves in the corner. So, all right. That's it for this. Stay tuned for the rest of Henry's video. Leave a comment.
But some of the stuff about the nature of the corner and the nature of kind of what I got out of my experience the other day on House of Woo called to mind some of the discourse and conversation that I've been having in my church about getting young people in and the nature of like what the church should be, etc. And so what I'm hoping to do, I guess we scene transition. We'll try. Oh, that's awkward. Okay. An older gentleman in the church who has been sort of like a coach, mentor to me for a little while and just kind of helping me figure out how to do specifically men's ministry, sent this in an email to me the other day. It's called What Young Adults Look For in a Church. This is Lifeway research. I have my own reservations with some of what these articles and stuff entail. One of the concerns that I have, at least in my church, and I don't know if this is across the board in other spaces that are not so attuned to the culture or attuned to what's really happening, is kind of this insistence on what is kind of programmatic, or insistent on what is kind of always been here or was applicable and appealing in like the, I don't know, X period amount of time before. So like Lifeway is not something that I'm super familiar with, or actually it's really something that I avoid. It's resources for the church, specifically the Southern Baptist Convention, which I am a part of. And so he sent me this article and I kind of rolled my eyes initially, only because this is kind of the similar content that I get a lot elsewhere. There's another article I might dig up and maybe complain about. But this article is really not helpful in kind of describing what young adults are looking for beyond a couple of vague terms. I don't want to go through that. And then I guess the goal ultimately from this is to kind of say, like, the corner does it. And, churches need to kind of maybe do some of what the corner is doing in their own way. Is this particularly novel? I don't know, probably not. Not when estuary protocols exist in person, etc. But um, I think that certain church ministries and groups, if they want growth outside of something like an estuary, might could take some lessons from what's going on in things like the House of Woo and like the Friday estuaries. So PJ Dunn wrote this. I'm very unfamiliar with him. Um, but it kind of opens and just discusses this idea of authenticity. And very quickly, authenticity as a word or authentic starts coming up all over the place in this article. The challenge our churches face in reaching adults, young adults, is connecting with them in authentic relationships and being a friend worth having. We lean toward a mindset that values programs over people. Programs can offer environments that foster relationships, but how often do we sacrifice relationships in the name of maintaining a program that we have always done? Um, I think this is very applicable to my church. I think it's, I'm sure, very applicable to antiquated models that still exist, right, for the like really small churches and ones that maybe aren't doing so well um, in certain respects. The programs thing is a big one. One of the struggles that I find right now is that programs are inauthentic. Right? They have this very much like we have to have like a kind of factory machine. We need to get people in, we need to make disciples, whatever that means, and that's its own discussion. And then we got to crank out and get a new group in, right? That's inauthentic. But then on the other side, uh, Mr. Dunn here is talking about authenticity, authenticity, authenticity. So he says first that authenticity is the currency of young adults. He says that, you know, they need to be seen, they need to be known by name, they need to be known in like what's going on in their own lives. Again, people, not programs. One of the deficits of this article, I think it is using these kind of like catchy like little terms and stuff. But my concern with this, and I brought it up in the email, which I don't have pulled up, and maybe I should just look at my notes again real quick. We are going to do that. Can I pause? All right, I think I got it unpaused. So here are my notes. This was my response to the article to well, my friend and kind of coach. So first off, we're throwing this buzzword authenticity around, and so the question is like, how do we define authenticity, right? Is it like the Kierkegaardian one, in which, right, you um, become authentic through, you know, the systems and things that are in place? Um, is it rising above predetermined values and being like your own thing in this individualistic sense? Is it just being real with other people? Um, like this needs to be defined, right? If we're going to talk about an authentic space, it needs to be defined if we're going to talk about authenticity, which I've touched on in other places in not corner related, church related things in a Lego article I wrote. I might just link that here into the video as well. Go check out Brick Nerd, I guess. So if being real, right, is what authenticity is, one of the questions I have is how real can people be with each other in one of these spaces, right? In the church, you have people of authority, you have individuals who are older than you have people who are younger than you. Um, how real can like a pastor or how real can a deacon or other leader in the church be without crossing certain boundaries or compromising certain boundaries? Um, I brought it up on the House of Woo. Part of the pressure, presently being a leader in the church to a degree, is that you have to kind of be careful about what you say around like new believers or individuals coming into the church or unfamiliar, right? And so, can you be 100% real at all times? Do you do like the kayfabe thing that's discussed in the corner and you have a particular identity, etc.? Is that authentic? Is that inauthentic? Is that just a part of the self? So that's one question. Another one is, are church members equipped to handle the authenticity of young adults, right? If the church is wanting to get young people in, they better be well prepared for the strange ideas or theology or philosophy or differing political views that they might have from the rest of the congregation or from select individuals. And then the fourth one, like, what does an authentic church look like? Is it what a lot of churches are trying to do? Like, we're trying to get back to basics. We're trying to do the Acts thing. Like, we're doing the early church. Are the high church models the authentic ones because they adhere to unwavering concepts and principles? Um, is a church authentic when it's just doing its own thing, as chaotic and messed up as it is, or like weird as it is? So those are some of the questions that came up in reading that article. Um, so while young adults are looking for friends, which is its own discussion that I could bring up as like the value, and that might be its own topic. Um, how do we do that, right? The question is, how do you connect, right, young adults to other members of the church in friendship, in community, in a way that's not programmatic insofar as using programs, if they're deemed inauthentic, right? What is that something else that binds and draws individuals and keeps them within that space? These are the kind of the concerns that I've had for quite a while in my church and talking with people that I know in like more leadership-ish positions, or people who are kind of just privy to the structures that exist. And I think some of my concerns are, I don't want to say resolved, but don't exist or are maybe are fixed in things like the corner in the House of Woo. Um, Ethan Cahy emailed me after I was on the House of Woo, and he was amused at it was just me with like a bunch of, as we might call, like the old guys. And one, it was super familiar for me and comfortable for me to be in that environment because that's where I've been for like so long and stuff. But I think that that was really cool and really valuable because that's what I wish the church, at least that I was at, was able to really do. Mark and Ron were so very sweet and giving me the time and the space by which to share my own concerns. And I'll put some of the clips here in this video, probably near the end, just to showcase some like the highlights of that time. And then McMo showed up and he was really cool and also gave some advice and suggestions. And I came out of the whole event at the end of it just really encouraged and much appreciative. And at the end of it, I was like, yeah, no, this is what the church is like. My church is men's ministry. This is what I think the church wants to do and thinks it can do. And I'm not, I'm not sure how they can do it. And I don't even know if I know all the inner workings of the corner, but I know that what's happening in the digital space here in this part of the internet is doing what I think a lot of churches want to do and what I think PJ Dunn and other Southern Baptist or evangelical or Protestant leaders want for the church. And I don't know if they have it all the way beyond kind of like keywords. This is very rough. I'm just going to play some clips from the House of Woo that I was on, and we'll just call it a day with this being kind of an inaugural video and foray into the corner as I kind of figure out my groove in space and all of this. If you found the video, cool. Let me know what you think. Or if you want to talk about things, let me know. That's all, I guess. So long. Thesis that Tampa being the source of existential dread and concern is pretty good. I think that was enough.
Wow, Henry, that was sad. That was like, that's deconstruct. That's, I don't know what that is, but that was like, no.
That's my humor right there.
Griswold Graham says McMo was on 10 hours this weekend.
Oh, wow.
But now he is, well, you're both East Coast, so you, at least you're on in the same time zone.
I'll be more in tune then.
McMosev at McMosev.
You know,
I hear a dog.
no, all kidding aside.
There he is.
Dun, 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 dun.
I made it. Please continue.
All right, boys. McMo's in the house. Straighten up, fly right.
Yeah, I was my 2 cents I was going to throw in is whenever I'm in a funk, you're just feeling whatever, just dry, whatever you want to put it. I go back to what I know is good for me, that I like. And I will drag myself there, kicking and screaming. And the moment I plug in and clock in, God shows up. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And you plow through it. And I wonder if that's actually character development. I wonder if that's the refinement that it's not always crosses or tragedies. It's just day by day life.
That's the that sounds like a very C.S. Lewis kind of thing. It's the
Really?
troughs and the peaks, and the
Or,
mundane being the kind of the biggest concern and detractor.
Yeah.
or I would say it's a Whitehead process theology where God is luring you through your bliss to all the good.
I like that. Yeah. It's for a long time, I went through a dry spot that I had to work through. And eventually God brought me through it. But because of that, if I ever have a dry spot, nothing compares to what I went through, so that anything that comes after, it's easy to blow off. And then if someone else comes and I hear them, they're like, hey, I'm hitting this funk. I'm like, okay, well, this is what I did. This is what got me through it. Go back to what you first love, and know that you get stronger. It's the only superpower I think I have besides God in my life is don't quit. I wish it was deeper than that.
That's pretty good.
That's life.
That's the better way to explain, like, you got to abide.
I hate that.
I do too. Oh, it's so bad.
And yet, like, I'll bide you straight back and beat you with this microphone right now. You tell me about it's.
What's wrong with the word abide?
It's like the cop out biblical answer sometimes. It's like a Sunday school answer without an actual proper exploration of why it's important.
Right. Gotcha. So if you just saying it
to say it as like it's implied that the meaning is understood is dumb. It's like read your Bible and pray. It's like, well, you actually do kind of need to figure out why it's important to read your Bible, and you kind of got to understand the significance of prayer for that to make anything worthwhile.
Right. I have 5 pieces of advice for our young friend Henry. I'm afraid you old guys might have gotten distracted with him being single and dwelt too much on the girl problem. That is not a problem. The problems start coming when you're with a girl.
So I've heard.
This is coming from a man approaching midlife crisis age, 35 or so.
I'm also happily married. But I was in the exact, not the exact spot that Henry's in, but very, very similar. Lots of eyes on me. And so I've got basically 5 pieces of advice I was trying to think through that might have helped the younger me, and it might help you out a little bit. So the first one is basically don't turn to any type of chemicals for relief. Even like too much sugar, like if you're finding that every Sunday night you're just cramming Oreos, like that would be a very bad sign. I mean, to do it every so often as like a way to have fun. I'm not, you're young, you're going to do dumb stuff, like go crazy. But basically I started smoking cigarettes right around the time when I had the most eyeballs on me. Because it was just a little too much to handle. And so I just needed an outlet and a relief. And 12 years later, still smoking. So don't do that. That becomes something that you have to deal with later. Secondly so that's something not to do. Stay away from like obvious chemical, performance enhancing drugs. The thing to do is to do more good in secret that you don't tell anybody about and that nobody sees. So sometimes, a couple ideas that spring to mind. You could go across town into St. Pete's or whatever and help out with like a homeless shelter down there, and make sure, to the best of your ability. It's kind of like a spy mission. You got to make sure to the best of your ability, nobody at your church or over authority or from whom's gaze you're under knows about it. And then, so that's number 2. Number 3 and number 4 are kind of connected, but you need at least one dude who's like quite a bit older than you, probably like same age as your dad, or maybe a little younger if your dad's old, like super old. But the hard part, that's the easy part, is finding somebody like that. The hard part is they need to basically promise you a vow of silence, and you need to trust it. And you need to be, so it's a difficult relationship to find. Counseling is one way to do it, like Christian counseling. If you prefer to call it like a coach, that's good too. But you need to have an older guy whose opinion you trust to do 2 things. So this would be subpoint A and B of advice number 3. You need to be completely honest with them. So like to the best of your ability, like the worst of your sins and how they make you feel and how they make you feel about yourself. And you need to kind of be able to the best of your ability, at least work towards a situation where you can be completely honest with this older person. That probably better a man than a woman. Mm-hmm. And then you need a peer who you tell almost everything to. And the reason I say you tell almost everything to them is because, especially when you're young, like a young man in this day and age, I think it's very much of a temptation. Like how Rick was saying, you're a sensitive guy, so it'd be woo, wow, very attractive to the ladies. But that's also it also comes with its own set of pitfalls, right? And so I have been in this, but you can get stuck in it too, where it's a peer-to-peer relationship, but because you're either overexposed, like this person does everything bad about you, or everything good about you, or they're your best friend in the world. The basically why you don't tell them everything is because they're probably just as stupid as you. And so like if you both are telling each other your like worst ideas, then it's like a recipe for failure. So hopefully you're not as big of a fool as I am, and you don't hang around with fools like I did and do. But yeah, so that's number 3 and number 4. And then number 5 is, what was it? It was to practice something. But now I can't remember because my short-term memory failed me. But I can't remember the 5th one. But it was something about just practicing. Oh, I remember. Start practicing disagreeing with the people who are above you or the people that you're worried about. Because to keep it in and try to do it with small things, and don't let it get carried away to where you're always disagreeing all the time. But if you're in a situation at church or really just in life in general, and you can't ever voice a disagreement, that's probably not a great situation to be in. And part of that might be that you don't know how to, or the part of it might be that the person that you're with doesn't know how to take disagreement, or the person you're interacting with. But start practicing how to disagree well and in love. And that'll not only help you in like ministry and in life and in work and in your relationships, but it also helps you just with yourself. Because when you start, part of the long my encouragement is that like, I don't know of anybody older than me, younger than me, same age as me, who has like really cracked this whole sin thing. Like it seems to just kind of keep bubbling up. And the best you can do apparently is just to ignore it. But I don't think that that's what we're called to do. So, I think keep going. You're doing good. But that would be my advice. End of TED Talk.
Thank you.
I liked it.
I do too.
Approaches are, that's where the alignment is between Graham and I.
Okay, so what is bringing down the fourth wall project, Graham?
A terrible spell. And part of that spell, the humans have the campfire circuitry. For whatever reason, probably because it. So like, the television engages that, and like that's when your tribal elders are passing on information and stuff. So like those things are hijacked and make everybody feel like their audience. And like if you watch characters in series that do break the fourth wall, and that's what the fourth wall I'm referencing when I do it. It's the wall behind which you are audience and not a human. So
okay.
Hashtag paintball for Jesus, @GrimGrizz, hashtag break the fourth wall.
So like you do like break the fourth wall that doesn't exist and be like,
break the fourth wall a little bit.
You really helped me break the fourth wall. Like, you know, it's just people.
Good poetry is definitely it's definitely always trying to break the fourth wall.
Always tried, as Grimgris says, to break the fourth wall to the degree that I can.